Have you ever felt something was off about someone, though you couldn't explain why? They were polite, smart, charitable even. Their words were kind, their actions well measured. But beneath the smooth surface, your body tensed. Your instincts whispered what your logic could not grasp. Something isn't right here. Carl Jung would say, you weren't paranoid. You were perceiving the most dangerous kind of person, not because they were loud, angry, or overtly hostile, but precisely because they seemed too good. You see, we've been taught to fear those who raise their voice, show rage, or break rules. But what if the deeper danger lies in the mask of perfection? What if the people who most insist they're always good are the ones with the deepest denial of their own darkness? Welcome to the quiet, chilling world of the unexamined shadow. In this video, we'll walk through the exact dynamic Jung warned us about. You'll learn to spot the one psychological trait that, when ignored, doesn't just warp relationships, it quietly destroys them. And it often hides in those who seem the most morally upright. But this isn't just about them. If you're willing, it's also about you. We all carry a shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge, the anger we mask as kindness, the envy we disguise as critique, the need for control we justify as care. Jung's wisdom doesn't ask us to eliminate these parts. It demands that we face them. Because here's the truth. What we refuse to admit in ourselves doesn't vanish. It becomes projection, manipulation, passive cruelty, spiritual arrogance. And over time, the person who insists, "I could never hurt anyone," becomes the very person who does without even realizing it. So if you've ever been confused by someone's split between words and energy, if you've ever doubted your intuition because someone seemed so kind, or if you're on a path of self-discovery and want to understand how your own hidden traits could be sabotaging your life from within, stay with me. This might just be the most important truth you'll hear today, because the greatest danger is not the shadow we can see, it's the one that's denied, completely. And when we deny the shadow, we don't escape it. We become enslaved by it. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. Let's take a deeper look at what Jung revealed, and what it means for how we see others, how we love, and how we live. Part 1. The social mask and the inner shadow. We all wear masks, not out of deceit, but survival. From childhood we learn, often without words, that certain parts of ourselves are acceptable while others are not. When you smiled and were praised, you kept smiling. When you cried too loud, were too wild, or showed too much anger, the warmth of others pulled away. So you learned to shape yourself like clay, hide the inconvenient, perform the pleasing. This is what Jung called the persona, your social face. The version of you designed to fit in, to be liked, to succeed. But the persona is not the full truth of who you are. It is a curated mask. A necessary one, perhaps, but still a mask. Behind it lives something deeper, something older, something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Jung called this the shadow, the collection of all the traits, emotions, and desires we've rejected in ourselves, not because they are bad, but because they didn't fit the image we were told to become. Have you ever noticed how quickly you push away your own jealousy? How you justify your silent resentment, pretending it's not there? Or how you shrink your own ambition because being too driven might seem selfish? This is your shadow speaking. It is your sadness when you say, "I'm fine." Your anger disguised as politeness. Your loneliness hidden behind productivity. Your desire for freedom masked as being responsible. And here's the danger. The more we deny this shadow, the more it grows powerful beneath the surface. You might say, "But I'm a kind person. I don't want to hurt anyone." Yes, and that's precisely why your shadow can harm, because when we don't acknowledge our darker impulses, they don't disappear. They sneak into our relationships sideways. That sharp tone you used with your partner, but instantly justified as just being honest, that envy toward a friend's success that you disguised as helpful feedback, That concern you showed someone that was really about control. Shadow. The person who believes they are always kind, always humble, always rational, is often the one most blind to the ways they manipulate, dominate, or project. And this is where things become dangerous, not only for others, but for yourself. Because living through a mask severs you from your soul. You begin to feel empty, performative, anxious. You say the right things but feel lifeless inside. You smile, but secretly you're exhausted from hiding. And yet, here is the paradox. The shadow is not evil. It's simply you. The real you. The full you, waiting to be seen. It contains your buried passion, your unexpressed truth, your power, your intuition, even your playfulness. These aren't flaws to get rid of. They're fragments of your wholeness. Jung taught us this. What you deny in yourself, you are destined to project onto others, and what you refuse to integrate will eventually sabotage your life from the inside out. So ask yourself, what part of me have I locked away to be accepted? Where have I worn a mask for so long, I've forgotten the face beneath it? And most importantly, am I ready to meet my shadow, not with judgment, but with compassion? Because the moment you do, the mask begins to loosen, and something real, raw, and profoundly alive begins to stir beneath it. Part 2. The shadow doesn't disappear, it morphs. You may think that by ignoring the darkness inside you, you've rendered it powerless. But the truth, as Jung warned, is far more unsettling. The shadow doesn't vanish. It doesn't dissolve just because you pretend it's not there. No, it morphs. It adapts. It finds new and clever ways to make itself known. You might believe you've conquered your anger because you no longer raise your voice. But then, why do your words cut like knives wrapped in politeness? Why do people flinch, not at what you say, but how you say it? That is anger, wearing a mask. You might claim you've outgrown jealousy, but then, why does it sting when someone else is praised? Why do you subtly withdraw when your friend shines too brightly? That is envy crouching in the shadows. Or maybe you've always told yourself, I'm not controlling, I just care. But why do others feel suffocated around you? Why does your concern always come with conditions? That's not care. That's control, disguised as love. This is what happens when the shadow is exiled. It doesn't die. It evolves, quietly, skillfully, and often destructively. Like a child locked in a basement, it starts pounding on the walls, desperate to be seen, and if it's ignored long enough, it begins to sabotage. Not out of malice, but as a cry for integration. You may think you're composed, generous, a good person, and perhaps you are. But the moments that betray you, the overreaction, the sarcasm, the quiet resentment, those are not accidents. They're messages, signals that some part of you has been denied for too long. And the longer it stays in the dark, the more distorted it becomes. Jung put it plainly. What you do not make conscious will be lived out as fate. In other words, your disowned parts will live your life for you. They'll choose your partners. They'll dictate your reactions. They'll craft your story while you stand by, bewildered at why everything keeps falling apart. Have you ever pushed someone away, only to regret it the moment they left? Have you ever watched yourself destroy something good, unable to stop? That was not sabotage. That was your unconscious shadow finally getting your attention the only way it knew how, through chaos. But here's the terrifying part. The more refined the mask, the more dangerous the shadow. Those who seem endlessly agreeable, gentle, or spiritual, yet quietly leave destruction in their wake, are not harmless. They are split. They have so over-identified with their light that they can no longer see their darkness. And what is unseen is uncontrolled. The person who insists, I never get angry, is often the one who manipulates the most. The one who says, I'm always kind, is often the one who wounds with invisible daggers. Why? because they've disowned the very parts that give their humanity depth and complexity. To be fully human is to carry both light and shadow, to know both grace and fury, and to take responsibility for all of it. You are not dangerous because you have a shadow. You are dangerous when you refuse to see it. So instead of fearing your impulses, your messiness, your contradictions, turn toward them. Ask yourself, where am I pretending to be someone I'm not? What emotion have I buried so deep it now shows up sideways? What part of me is asking not to be banished, but to be heard? Because once you stop fighting your shadow and start listening to it, something shifts. You no longer leak pain into your relationships. You speak what you mean. You stand your ground without crushing others. You love without needing control. Integration begins. And from that integration comes power. Part 3. The most dangerous person isn't the openly wicked. It's the one who believes they're pure. We often look for danger in sharp teeth and raised voices, in the obvious manipulator, the aggressive boss, the narcissist who wears their ego like a crown. But Jung, always one step deeper, warned us otherwise. He said, the most dangerous person is not the one who knows they are capable of harm. It is the one who believes they are only capable of good. Let that sink in, not the sinner who confesses, but the saint who refuses to look in the mirror. This is the person who smiles while they slice, who speaks in soft tones yet leaves bruises, who insists they are kind, spiritual, evolved, and yet their relationships are marked by confusion, guilt, and silent pain. Why? Because they are utterly blind to their own shadow. When someone believes they are entirely virtuous, they lose the capacity for self-reflection. They interpret every action through the lens of moral righteousness, even the harmful ones. They don't control, they protect. They don't manipulate, they help. They don't criticize, they care deeply. They don't abandon you, they respect themselves. And if you feel hurt, that's on you for misunderstanding their good intentions. It's a fortress made of light, and you can't argue with light. You can't question someone who's convinced they're the embodiment of love, truth, and higher wisdom. This is what makes them dangerous, because their shadow, so deeply disowned, finds subtler ways to act out. They might withhold affection as punishment and call it healthy boundaries. They might guilt-trip you into obedience and call it emotional honesty. They might belittle you behind a smile and say, "I'm just being real." But what they're really doing is projecting. They can't face their jealousy, so they call you insecure. They can't own their anger, so they say you're too sensitive. They can't admit their superiority complex, so they label you difficult, defensive, or broken. It's not self-awareness, it's spiritual bypassing, a refusal to feel the mess of being human, a refusal to say, yes, I too can be cruel, I too can be afraid, I too can fail. And here's the paradox. The person who admits they have a dark side is far less dangerous than the one who denies it. Because acknowledgement creates accountability, denial creates delusion. Imagine two people. One says, I struggle with control. I'm working on it. The other says, I just care too much. People always misunderstand me. Who do you trust more? Exactly. The one who sees their shadow, even imperfectly, is on the path of growth. The one who claims to have no shadow, they are ruled by it. And this applies not just to others, but to you. Ask yourself, where am I too attached to being seen as good? Have I ever justified control as love? Have I ever harmed someone while convincing myself I was helping? This isn't about shame. This is about liberation. Because the moment you allow yourself to be complex, to carry both light and darkness, you stop performing and you start healing. You become trustworthy, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. And in a world of masks, honesty is a rare and holy act. So the next time someone insists they are always loving, always calm, never the problem, pause. Not in judgment, but in awareness. Because, as Jung taught us, it is not the darkness within us that is most dangerous, It is the illusion of light that blinds us from seeing it. Coming up in Part 4, we'll explore how the refusal to acknowledge your shadow leads to subtle emotional sabotage, and why integration is the only path to inner peace. Shall we keep going? Part 4. The denial of one's shadow is the true danger. What happens when someone refuses to see their own darkness? When they turn their face to the light so completely that they pretend no shadow follows them? Carl Jung warned us, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let's pause here, because this isn't just theory. It plays out every single day, in your relationships, in your choices, in your inner dialogue. The refusal to face one's shadow doesn't make the shadow disappear, it makes it stronger. And worse, it makes it invisible to the one carrying it. When a person is unaware of their shadow, three things inevitably happen. First, they lose the ability to reflect. They don't question themselves. They don't ask, "Why did I say that? Was I really being kind, or was I controlling? Am I listening, or am I just trying to win?" Without this pause, without self-inquiry, there is no growth, only repetition. And repetition becomes karma. Second, they become blind to the harm they cause, not because they're evil, but because they lack the inner mirror. They don't recognize that their sarcasm wounds, that their advice feels like manipulation, that their silence feels like punishment. They move through life dropping emotional shrapnel without ever hearing the explosions, because their ears are closed to accountability. And yet, they believe they're the ones always being misunderstood, always the mature one, always the victim. They're not lying, they're simply unaware. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because a person who knows they're capable of harm can choose otherwise. A person who thinks they can't harm, they'll justify every act, even cruelty, as necessary, even noble. Third, and perhaps most heartbreakingly, they repeat their own trauma. Unhealed pain doesn't just stay inside, it seeks expression. And if it can't come out as grief, honesty, or healing, it comes out as control, judgment, distance, or domination. They become the very force that once wounded them. The child who was emotionally neglected grows into the adult who withholds love. The person shamed for being sensitive becomes the one who mocks vulnerability. The one controlled becomes the controller. This is the cycle Jung begged us to break. But here's the hard truth. You cannot break a cycle you do not see. If you are always defending your image of being good, you will never heal the parts of you that are hurting others. Denial is not strength. It is fear wearing a halo. So what do? We begin with this simple but powerful act, radical honesty, not with the world, yet, but with yourself. Sit in silence and ask, what traits in others trigger me most? Where have I acted in ways that contradict the person I believe I am? When have I hurt someone and justified it? This is not about shame. This is about reclamation. Because the moment you admit, yes, I can be impatient. Yes, I can be manipulative. Yes, I sometimes use love as a weapon. You begin to see. And what you can see, you can heal. You do not become dangerous by acknowledging your shadow. You become dangerous when you believe you don't have one. Part 5. A quiet warning. When goodness becomes blindness, beware, not of the loud, the reckless, the flawed, but of those who never admit they're wrong, those who always speak in the name of morality, those who correct others, but never correct themselves, those who wear the shining armor of goodness without ever checking what lies beneath it. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And one of the most sophisticated ways we avoid it is through righteousness. You've seen it, maybe even lived it. The parent who justifies emotional neglect as tough love. The partner who controls every decision, claiming it's for your own good. The friend who criticizes under the guise of honesty, The teacher, leader, or spiritual figure who silences questions, saying they know better. All of it sounds noble on the surface, but beneath it is a refusal to look inward. To Jung, the most dangerous person isn't the one who admits their flaws. It's the one who can't see any. Because if you don't believe you have a shadow, then every harmful act becomes justified. Every manipulation becomes wisdom. Every boundary violation becomes help. There is no pause, no humility, no questioning, only certainty. And certainty, when unexamined, is a breeding ground for harm. Let me ask you gently, have you ever been on the receiving end of that kind of love? A love that claimed to help you, but left you smaller, more confused, more silenced? It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, in rules, in expectations, in guilt disguised as care. It takes deep discernment to recognize not all goodness is good, not all kindness is kind, and not every loving person is loving in the way they believe. So what's the solution? Humility, not performative, not false modesty, but a real willingness to say, I don't always know, I'm not always right, and I too carry shadows. True strength lies not in being flawless, but in being able to witness yourself fully and still choose to grow. The people who admit their capacity for harm are often the safest, because they are awake. They are watching their steps. They are listening to their impact. But those who cling too tightly to being good will do anything to protect that image, even if it means hurting others in the name of love. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not just the parts that shine, not just the traits others approve of, but also the shadow, the envy, the fear, the need for control, the old wounds still pulsing quietly beneath the surface." And yet, that is where all true growth begins. The real danger in life is not in having a shadow. We all do. The danger lies in pretending we don't. When we refuse to see our own darker aspects, they don't vanish. They become projections. They leak out in sarcasm, in blame, in passive control. They live in our relationships, repeating the same cycle over and over, while we point fingers and wonder why we feel stuck. But the moment you turn inward, not with judgment, but with awareness, everything shifts. You begin to notice when you're defending instead of listening, when you're correcting others, but avoiding your own inner tension, when you call it love, but it's really a plea for control. This isn't about shame. It's about liberation. Because when you finally accept that you too are capable of anger, manipulation, ego, and pain, something sacred happens. You gain the power to choose. You can stop reacting blindly. You can stop blaming others for your own unrest. You can hold your shadow and say, yes, this too is part of me, but it no longer needs to drive the car. And in that moment, you reclaim your integrity. Because wholeness isn't about being only light. It's about being honest. When you're honest with yourself, you become safer to others. You become more compassionate, less reactive, more grounded, less self-righteous. So the next time someone triggers you, pause. Ask, what is this showing me about me? The next time you want to control, to fix, to dominate, to retreat, ask, is this coming from fear or truth? And most of all, the next time you feel the urge to prove how good or right you are, let yourself soften. Be curious instead, because the most dangerous person is the one who never looks inward, but the most powerful person is the one who does, again and again. So start there, with gentleness, with courage, with the willingness to see all of you. That is how the inner war ends. That is how love, the real kind, begins. If this message stirred something in you, if it helped you see yourself or someone else with deeper clarity, then don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe for more content that doesn't just inform, but transforms. Leave a comment. What part of today's reflection spoke to your soul? And if you're walking this inner path too, you're not alone. We're growing together.